Tonight our speaker is Mary Helen Stefaniak, who teaches creative writing, I almost say all over the world, but in addition is also an author herself. She and her husband came to Iowa City about 40 years ago for her to attend the writer's workshop. And since then, for 40 years, she's been back and forth to Iowa City, almost several times a year. And she's a retired faculty member from the Creighton University, where she teaches creative writing. She taught creative writing in summer festivals each for years, and so she's been here for any number of summers. And after retirement, she's been, among other things, teaching in the West Coast and also Beijing, China. The topic she's going to be reading from her book, The World of Ponzi, a mystery. And I gather that Pondside is a nursing home, and so I suspect it's essentially a murder in a nursing home. So with that introduction, here's Mary Stefaniak.
Thank you, Al. I think we're good. Well, I'm very glad. Am I on? You can hear me? Okay. I'm very glad to be here, and pleased to have that very nice introduction. I'm here to talk about and read a little bit from my latest novel, The World of Ponzi, which you can see standing right here. And you can also see there are some piles of books. The ducks, the significance of the ducks will become clearer to you as I read a couple of excerpts from the novel. I'm selling these books for Prairie Lights, and they're not my personal books. They're Prairie Lights inventory, and we are hopeful that I will be able to successfully use the card reader that I have to take a charge card. I've done it before, but that doesn't mean anything. But I thought I'd mention that. So I'll try not to go on too long, so that if there are some questions, whether about the novel or about writing novels or whatever comes to your mind out of this this presentation, we'll have a little bit of time for that. I'll try to keep. I will be looking at my watch, which I know is rude, but also keeps us on time. I think that's all I really need to say. Oh, and of course, I'll also be happy to sign your book if you purchase one here, or even if you purchased it somewhere else. I know that there are some people in the audience who have read the book, already. So maybe they'll be nice and start us off with a question when the time comes for Q&A, and silence descends, that sort of thing. Well, now the book, you can see it has this really rather striking cover that I like actually very much. And then underneath the cover, I didn't realize, I got a box of books because they send some books to the author, but Prairie Lights got the books first. And I was going to do an event back in April in Des Moines. And I, took the books home, and I was at home, and I thought, well, I wonder what's underneath the cover, is it red, is it black, is it pink, whatever it is. So I took the cover off, and underneath, I guess I don't really have to do this, I can just hold up the one I have here. underneath is this. It's another duck, but this is a pixelated duck, and it's a pixelated duck that is kind of fading away. And all of that is quite relevant to certain aspects of the novel. It does take place, as Al said, in a nursing home for the most part. There are some parts that go elsewhere, but most of it takes place in a nursing home called Pondside Manor. And it's not a particular nursing home. It's kind of a composite, but because I have been living in Iowa City for 40 years, the setting of the whole ball of wax is kind of, I draw my details, especially my geographical details, from the Iowa City area. So if you read the book, you may think, oh, I know what she's talking about there. I know what neighborhood that is, and so forth, which is always fun. I think that's always fun. And of course, you'll also say, well, that's not right. Because that also happens, and that's probably even more fun for the reader. She got that wrong, right? Anyway, so it takes place in a nursing home, and there is, it starts out with two bodies being found. They're both found outdoors. One is found sort of in the edge of the parking lot, and clearly it was the guy has his fishing, it's a resident, an elderly man, resident, who has some fishing poles and things with him. He had gone down to the pond. It's not called Pondside Manor for nothing. There's a pond, next door and down the hill, sort of. And sometimes people fish off the little pier. And so he had gone down there, and he had discovered, apparently, we don't know because he's dead, but it looks like he discovered the body in the pond, which is another resident. And the man, the victim in the pond is also a resident of Pondside, a younger man, a man in his late 40s, who was in the late stages of ALS, and that's the reason that he needs the nursing home care. All of that's not the spoiler, of course, not a spoiler. You find all that out in the first 5 pages because the murder story a mystery has to begin with some bodies, unfortunately, for the deceased. Now that you know that, I want to tell you a little bit about, I'm going to put this back here, on this plate stand, as you might have recognized as a plate stand. I want to tell you that, there's a thing that the novelist Zadie Smith said one time that really resonated with me. She said, the novelistic impulse is this. The novelistic impulse is to leap into another person's life. There are various ways to write about things and people and problems and so forth. But what the novelist does is leap into another person's life, into the characters. Right? And in this novel, I leap into 5 of the characters' lives. There are some other characters as well. And what I'd like to do is read to you a little snippet from each of those characters. And that's what I've got to present from the book. I've tried to make them as short as I could make them and still, let you see enough. So 2 of those 5 characters are, we could call them our point of view characters, the characters through whose point of view we see the story. 2 of them are residents of Pondside Manor, and 2 of them are staff members. They're the 2 staff members, one works in the kitchen and one is a certified nursing assistant. So that takes care of 4 of them. The 5th one is actually the administrator of the nursing home, a woman who's also in her 40s and who, as one reader put it, clearly seems to be in the wrong job. But some of these people are, not all of the people I'm going to read, that I will read snippets about. Many of the residents are playing a video game. that was created by the man deceased in the pond, created for them. And it features, I'm going to read enough so that I don't really need to tell you very much about it, but the video game is also, it's an alternate reality game, you know, like an alternate life game where you play the game and you're a character in a different life, or you're yourself, but in a different situation, not in the nursing home. And you'll see how it works when I read to you. So the first character I'm going to read a little bit about is actually the beginning of chapter 1. And if you were reading the book yourself, you'd already know that somebody was found in the pond, because you kind of find that out in the prologue, or you can deduce it pretty readily. But the character here, her name is Laverne Slacek, and she is, I believe she's 86 years old. She's in her mid-80s. And she is a resident of Pondside Manor. She does not know who or that anyone was found in the pond, but she knows something's up, as you'll see. There we go. Okay. So I think this is going to take me about 4.5 minutes to read this little bit. Okay. Laverne Slacek had been hiding in her room since breakfast. Not that she had eaten any. Who could eat breakfast with all those red and blue lights zooming along the walls in the dining room, and the food service people gawking at the windows, blocking her view, instead of feeding screaming Jeannie and the others who moaned more quietly but could not feed themselves? Laverne had gotten a few glimpses of police cars, an ambulance, a fire truck. They always sent a fire truck, just in case. She asked a staff member what was going on, but the girl didn't seem to know anything, or if she did, she wasn't talking. Laverne had given up on getting any more coffee. She removed her clothing protector, which was actually a towel-sized bib, and hot-footed it down the hall toward the library, where she found Dwayne Lotspeak already hunched over the computer in the corner. After cursing her luck loud enough to make Dwayne's shoulders twitch, Laverne had taken a left out of the library and scooted down Hawkeye Lane toward her room. Only one of the 3 donated computers in the library was powerful enough to play the game, although the skinny young fellow who worked in the kitchen intended to upgrade the other 2, he kept saying. The game had been invented by the poor man across the hall who had Lou Gehrig's disease. Robert was his name. Laverne could not begin to imagine how anyone could invent what happened when she clicked the little duck on the computer screen that had the words World of Ponzi under it. In the World of Ponzi, Laverne Slacek was not a former high school biology teacher, long retired. She was a neuroscientist at the University of California, Berkeley, a member of a team racing against the clock to crack the code that would put the kibosh on Alzheimer's and other dementias once and for all, earning the team a nice pile of money in the process, and maybe a free trip to Sweden. Laverne had always wanted to live in the Bay Area, ever since she and her long-departed husband, Bill, spent their 25th wedding anniversary there more than 30 years ago. Sitting in the upper deck at Candlestick, where they could look right out over the bleachers to the sailboats in the bay, Laverne had been surprised every time she glanced at Bill by how young he looked. He was 57 on their 25th, with his giant's cap settled low and shading his face, turning the yellow tinge of his skin back into a golden tan. His liver was halfway to gone then, although they didn't know it yet. In the World of Ponzi, Laverne could see the Golden Gate Bridge from the glass wall of her beautifully decorated condo. She and Bill went to see the Giants play at Candlestick Park, not at Ma Bell or wherever they played now, and the notorious offshore winds were always in the home team's favor. Surely Dwayne Lotspeak was finished with the computer by now. If not, she'd go ahead and ask him to log off and let her have a half hour or so just to tide her over. Laverne poked her head into the hallway. Boysenberry Boulevard was empty of traffic, although there was still some commotion going on at the far end of it, where it opened on the atrium, which is what the brochure called the many-windowed and almost always empty front lounge. It wasn't empty now. Laverne caught a glimpse of reflective tape on the back of a fireman's coat, but everyone's attention was directed at the windows. Nobody was looking down the hallway toward Laverne's room. She followed her walker, which she didn't need but often used as a kind of rolling handrail, in the opposite direction, letting it lead her past the deserted nurse's station and back down Hawkeye Lane toward the library. The good computer, Glory Be, was free. Dwayne Lotspeak was nowhere in sight. Laverne eased herself into the easy up, easy down ergonomic chair, her heart already beating faster and her fingertips almost tingling. She took the headphones out of the drawer and plugged the cord into the hole before she put them on. She experienced a moment of not exactly panic when she couldn't find the little picture of a yellow duck that opened the world of Pondside. The duck link, they called it. She turned her head to search the screen with the good side of her brain, and there it was. Laverne maneuvered the mouse to bring the arrow over to the right side of the screen, where somebody, she supposed it had to be Dwayne, had moved the duck link into a row of other little pictures, the camera, the fox, the wastebasket. Finally, she got the arrow to settle on the duck. This took a while of dancing all around it first. Reminding herself to breathe normally, she clicked once and waited for the arrow to become a little hand. As we know, that's what always happens before the link opens. So Laverne is about to, or actually Laverne thinks she's about to open the game. But it turns out that not only is the creator of the game found dead in the pond, but the game has gone dark and nobody can get into it. So the residents and the staff members have a double motivation to solve the mystery of Robert's death, because pretty soon the police figure out what happened to the other gentleman who died of a heart attack because of all the things that had happened to him, finding the body in the pond. But they also want to get back in the game. And I particularly liked the metaphor of getting back in the game for the folks, both who work there and who live, in the nursing home. And also I needed to come up with something so that I could engage both the young workers, staff, and also the elderly residents. And so what I came up with was death, murder, which is, solving a mystery is always of interest. But I thought, well, it's got to be something even more urgent than that. So I locked them out of their video game. Now they're really in trouble. So you can hear a little bit, and you have a sense from what I read of what the game is like. You go to your portal. You open the game, you go to your portal, and it consists of things that you have chosen for Robert to put there into the portal, so that Laverne has chosen to return to San Francisco, not necessarily to her wedding anniversary alone, because she never did live in San Francisco. They went there, to celebrate the anniversary. But now, in the world of Pondside, she has a condo that overlooks the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's kind of how the game works. As you'll see a little bit more, we'll learn about a couple of other portals in the next part that I'm going to read. And that, Laverne did mention, the young man who worked in the kitchen. Right, well, he's the guy who has been assisting Robert, the gentleman with ALS, who created the game. He's been helping Robert create the other portals. And in turn, Robert, who has increasingly reduced use of his hands as a result of his ALS, and of other parts of his body as well. But Foster becomes, an extension of Robert in actually just putting the game together. And as a result, Foster, who is in fact has dropped out of high school for reasons you find out about if you read the book, but I'm not going to go there. He learns a great deal from Robert. So Robert is a very important person to Foster. So Foster might be, the young man who works in the kitchen, might be the only person in the nursing home who's more interested in what happened to Robert than in getting back into the game. Although he's also very interested in that, since he's kind of the second in command for the game, and everybody's after him to get them back into it. So he's heavily motivated there as well. Let's see. So I thought I'd read a little bit from Foster's point of view. I think you could see that even though it's not in the first person, we were getting that section. What I just read is from Laverne's point of view. We're trying to get into her portal. We hear about it. We're definitely experiencing the story from her perspective. So now we're going to go to a little bit briefer section, actually, from Foster's point of view. And that was another thing that was important to me, was to have the residents, and the two point of view character residents are elderly. One of them is suffering from dementia. Laverne is not. And I wanted them to be working with the young staff members. I wanted them both to have sort of the same thing at stake, so that was important to me in writing the book. And I'm going to read you a little bit about Foster, a shorter piece, and then I'm going to tell you how Foster came to be, because in a way, this character, the real life counterpart, in a sense, of this character, is really the reason I wrote this book. So anyway, here we go. Here's Foster. Oh, and this is, the part that I'm going to read is a little bit of a flashback. It's from 2 years earlier when they're first working on the game. There aren't a lot of flashbacks, but in order for us to get to know Robert a little, since he's dead at the start, there are some flashbacks, so we can see Foster and Robert together. And this is one of them. I just drank some water, but it didn't do any good. Okay. Foster didn't think geezers would go for a computer game, but Robert said, "Who needs an alternate reality more desperately than people in a nursing home? All the real world has to offer is a life sentence of institutional meals and fluorescent lighting." "I thought you liked the food here," Foster said. He works in the kitchen. It was the first time he had been in Robert's room, and he was trying to look as if he weren't astounded by the array of computers and things on the door-top desk. All Foster had then, before Robert fixed him up, was a PC he bought at a garage sale for $25. The secret to success with the senior population, Robert believed, was a personalized game, a world built of materials gathered from the player. He'd start with an interview, followed by the collection of photos, documents, the occasional audio recording or video, anything at all that could be used to digitize a person's memories and daydreams and desires. He had begun by working on a prototype for none other than the Pondside administrator, Kitty Landis. "Why her?" Foster said. Robert did the little neck stretch that was all he had left of shrugging his shoulders even 2 years ago. "Because she is the key to the bank." He had already wrangled one upgrade in the library from Administrator Landis in return for the development of her portal, which is what he called each customized environment. Before he knew it, Foster was spending a lot more time than he would have preferred to spend scrolling through Vogue and Vanity Fair to expand the administrator's virtual wardrobe. He was looking forward to working on Dwayne Lotspeak's Black Ops portal, which sounded like it would be more up Foster's alley, until he found out it was a dance studio. Robert told him that Lotspeak had been a dance instructor at some point in his life, presumably before the point where he lost his leg, but he had also been a U.S. Marine. The old man kept changing his mind about which life to revisit in the world of Pondside, until Robert, inspired by a wedding he'd witnessed in Afghanistan, came up with the idea of a dance hall in the middle of a combat zone. Naming the portal Black Ops instead of, say, Dwayne's Dance More was the old man's choice. Foster pretended to know what Robert was talking about when he said he had a natural user interface. He called it the NUI, that could do skeletal tracking on 1 or 2 moving subjects. The NUI would have been perfect for a dance game, Robert said, but Dwayne was too wobbly on his one leg plus prosthesis to dance in the sensor's field of view. Instead, the on-screen dance moves of an exceedingly debonair, 2-legged Dwayne were made by the pressures his thighs and backside exerted on a cushion pressed into the seat of his wheelchair, together with the movements of his shoulders against the cushion behind his back. Dancing is all in the hips and shoulders anyway, Latspeak explained one time, while Foster was adjusting the position of a sensor inside the seat cushion. Right, said Foster. People think it's the feet, Latspeak said, but the feet are incidental. Good thing, Foster thought. I think I'm gonna stop there with Foster at that point. But you see, you can kind of get Foster's attitude, from there. He likes these people, but he's a 20-something who works in the kitchen. Then, let's see, the next person I was going to read a little bit from, maybe I'll just read a tiny bit of it. This is probably good. It's a young man named Dakota who is a certified nursing assistant. And he is a college student, so he's really very different from Foster, who's a high school dropout, mostly washing dishes, but also doing some other kitchen tasks. They're very different, even though they're both young men in their 20s. And this one will tell you, as I read from Dakota's point of view now, Dakota's quite different from Foster. You're also going to hear about the fourth point of view character, the other resident of Pondside, whose life we leap into, a woman named Mary McIntyre, who as I said, has dementia and who is new to Pondside Manor. So it's nice that we'll get a little bit, although from the outside. And then I would say the very last thing I'll read to you is Mary McIntyre from the inside. So how Mary McIntyre perceives where she is and what she's doing. Dakota comes in, and Dakota does not play the game. He's too busy, he's a student. Whereas the Pondside administrator does play the game. So he's a college student, I said that already. Okay, he comes in, and the first shift RN says to him, "You've got Mary McIntyre today." "What do you mean, I've got Mary McIntyre?" Dakota said. "We're taking turns," she said, hanging a clipboard on the meds cart. Mary McIntyre had been at Pondside Manor for less than a week, and already she was legendary. When Dakota came to work on Monday, which was her first full day on the premises, Mary McIntyre was sitting on one of the seldom-used couches in the atrium, weeping, begging her daughter, who was sitting beside her, also weeping, to take her home. The poor old lady looked harmless, even deceptively frail, but at the nurse's station, Tori, the RN, was warning the oncoming shift of CNAs about her. Among other things, Tori said, consulting a fat spiral binder on the counter, she pulled out a total of 6 IVs during her last 5 days in the hospital. Also, it took 3 nurses and an aide singing "You Are My Sunshine" to make her put down the portable heart monitor she yanked off and was trying to use on the nurse's aide like a... Tori hesitated. She looked up from the page. "What's a cat o' nine tails?" That night, when the CNAs tried to give her a shower, Mary McIntyre had grabbed the shower head with both hands, lifted her feet up off the floor, and pulled the shower right out of the wall. She spent Tuesday and most of Wednesday zonked out, although she did manage to sweep a bowl of pureed spaghetti off the table and onto James Witkowski at dinner time on Wednesday. That was the old guy's last meal, too, Dakota realized. And then, Tori told him, the police found Mary wandering around among the emergency vehicles and personnel in the parking lot yesterday morning. Nobody knows how she got out of the building, Tori said. She pushed the meds cart past the counter. Don't let her out of your sight. Dakota found Mary in arts and crafts, the last one left at the long table, her head bowed over a heap of popsicle sticks. It looked like she was zonked again. "She's all yours," Stephanie, the activities director, said. Dakota wheeled Mary out to the lounge area between the nurse's station and the supply closet and parked her in front of the TV. "Well, Miss Mary," he said, crouching in front of her bowed head, "what do you think? Game shows or me TV?" She had no opinion. He aimed the remote. "All right," he said. "I dream of Jeannie, it is." He was lining up towels on the cart they called the shower tower, hoping the CNA who was missing from his shift hadn't decided to quit, when somebody spoke up behind him. "I wonder if my daughter knows I'm here." Dakota turned around. He was looking at the back of a wheelchair topped by a fluffy gray head and narrow shoulders. He put down the towel he was folding and turned the chair around by one handle. "Mary," he said, "you're back." She lifted her head and drew a bead on him with her eyes. "Are you a doctor?" "No, ma'am." "You look like one. You got doctor clothes." "Oh, everybody around here wears scrubs," Dakota said. "All trying to look like doctors," Mary grumbled. "Ma'am," Dakota said, "you may have something there." So that's Dakota. And I think you can tell he's not the same kind of guy as Foster. But, now, let me see. Let me check what time it is. Oh, okay, we're not too bad. I'd like to, I told you I was going to give you the story about how the young man who works in the kitchen is kind of the reason I wrote this novel. And Mary McIntyre, who we've heard about, although not been inside of, is another reason. My mother spent some time in a nursing home toward the end of her life, and she, definitely didn't want to be there. The part about the IVs might be true of my mother. She never did pull the shower head out of the wall, though I want you to know that. So Mary McIntyre is not based on, but inspired by my mother, who had a very strong personality her whole life, and wouldn't do something if she hadn't chosen to do it. And this was this is how she always was. And so in these circumstances, after she had a stroke and was and couldn't remember that she had the stroke, and didn't look as if she had a stroke at all, but had lost her right field of vision and her short-term memory, but sounded and looked exactly like she did before she had the stroke. It was just it was a particularly difficult situation. Hard to convince her that she'd had a stroke. Didn't look like it to her. But in any case, Mary McIntyre actually, maybe Mary McIntyre is a little more, spends a little more time in outside of other people's reality than my mother did, but there's a similarity there. Well, the first night she was in the nursing home, she wouldn't eat anything all day. She wouldn't eat the lunch. She wouldn't eat the dinner. And now she was starving. And, the lights were kind of dim in the kitchen and dining room area. And I was still there, hoping she would go to bed soon so that I could go home and go to bed as well. And, but she was hungry. And when my mother is hungry, she's hungry. And so we went out in search of some food. We didn't have anything. We went out into the nursing home. And the dining room was, didn't look like there was anything in operation. It didn't seem like there was anything happening at all. So we thought, well, we're just going to go into the kitchen. So we went into the kitchen, which is a very large, kitchen. And there was this young man there. And I think he was kind of cleaning up. And we couldn't just kind of open the refrigerators and look for ourselves. So we asked this young man if, said, my mom's really hungry, could we get her something to eat? Which clearly was not part of his job description at all, providing food for residents. He made her a jelly sandwich. He asked her what she would like. She said a jelly sandwich. And he made her a jelly sandwich. And we went out into the dining room, and she ate the whole thing. And that's something you should remember when you're reading the book. But in any case, the kindness of that young man led to the creation of Foster Kresowek. And I didn't know for sure how much my mother would be in the story, but she is as well. So that's kind of why this novel came to be. And the editor for my two previous novels, which were published by Norton, by W.W. Norton, when she received this manuscript, she said, no, I don't want a novel set in a nursing home. Why do you want to write an unconventional murder mystery, set it somewhere else? And I thought, well, no, the whole point is to set it in the nursing home. You know, the murders, the deaths are secondary because I'm trying to give my character something to do. So I found a different publisher. I should say my agent found a different publisher. And so this book is published by Blackstone Publishing, which used to do only audio books. If you go to the library, you'll find a lot of Blackstone audio, CDs, audiobooks. And a few years ago, they decided they wanted to get into the whole operation and make the books. So they made this wonderfully unconventional book. They do publish mostly, not all, but mostly like mysteries and thrillers, and also certain kind of women's fiction, and they don't, they're, I don't know, they're sort of trying to branch out, I guess. And so the book is marketed, as a thriller. It was on Publishers Weekly's list of thrillers and mysteries, and I thought, well, I've never been there before, that's kind of fun. And then the other nice thing about being marketed as a mystery is you're marketed to all ages, and also to both genders. So, you don't get you write you're marketed to all ages. So that's a good thing. Let's see how much time do I have time to, I could just do I want to have time for a couple of other things. I know, I want to read you just a tiny snippet of Kitty Landis, the nursing home administrator, this woman in her 40s, and late 40s. And she, at this point, this one only takes, I'm looking at the notes in the margin, apparently it takes 53 seconds for me to read this. If I read it at the same pace that I usually read, I don't know. But anyway, so Kitty is being interviewed by, she's talking to the police, Lieutenant Steinhoffel. And I'm just going to drop you right into that scene, just give you a paragraph, so you get a taste of what Kitty is like. So we were inside of Foster, we were inside of Laverne and Dakota, and now we're going to be inside of Kitty's point of view. She was finding it difficult to look Lieutenant Steinhoffel from homicide in the eye, not out of fear or any attempt at deception on her part, but because he had the bluest eyes she had ever seen on anyone, other than the young priest who used to teach religion classes at St. Mary's Academy, her long-defunct all-girls high school alma mater. Father, what a waste, the girls called him, referring to the sad fact that his genes stopped here, prevented by a vow of celibacy from ever doing anybody any good. Kitty Landis did wonder briefly, with eyes that blue, you had to wonder if Lieutenant Steinhoffel was wearing tinted contacts. She thought it would be quite disappointing to learn that he was. He didn't seem like the kind of man who would go out of his way to make his eyes a few shades bluer. No, Kitty suspected that Lieutenant Steinhoffel had no idea how blue his eyes were unless someone, his wife, had told him. If he was married, he didn't wear a ring, but as Kitty knew all too well, that didn't necessarily mean anything. So that's Kitty. And her world, her Pondside portal, in her Pondside portal, she's a fashion designer. She has a whole floor in the Manhattan office building. She's kind of Meryl Streep, as in The Devil Wears Prada. That's how she that's why poor Foster has to spend his days paging through Vogue and Vanity Fair to expand her wardrobe. And later, you actually do experience the game. I mean, they get into the game eventually. And you'll see how Kitty's portal works. And it's sort of, well, I shouldn't tell you. Yes, I should. I should just tell you this. I should tell you that one of the features of her portal, while she's in the game, is that her outfit, what she's wearing, changes every 15 minutes. So, she'll be in an evening gown, and then she'll be in some, Calvin Klein sportswear, and so on. Anyway, so it's kind of it's fun for everybody. So then the last person, so I think I read 4 out of the 5. So I'm going to read a little section of where we're inside Mary McIntyre's point of view. Now, as we've seen, when Mary McIntyre was talking to Dakota, she has, periods of lucidity where she does know exactly where she is, and but then also not. And she, at this point in the story, she is standing in the hallway outside the library at the nursing home, outside the closed doors of the library, and she can hear music coming from inside the library, right? So that's where she really is, or in our reality, and that's where she is. And we know that because Laverne has seen her there. So Laverne, in fact, was heading for the library, and when she saw Mary McIntyre outside the door, she headed in a different direction. So now we're going to just drop into where is Mary McIntyre? Into her perspective on where she is. Mary heard the music from the bottom of the stairs, where she'd stopped nervously to look up and down the street. Usually she went with her sisters or her friend Gladys to the USO, which took up the whole second floor above the hardware store. The other girls would serve punch and shoot the breeze with the servicemen, while Mary, who was too shy for small talk, stood at the edge of the dance floor, a cleared space adjacent to the jukebox in the corner of the room, and waited for someone to ask her to dance. Her average wait time was 45 seconds. Her sister Mildred had worked this out one afternoon using a stopwatch she borrowed from a young man, only a private but very nice looking, from Austin, Texas. If somebody played String of Pearls or Chattanooga Choo Choo, the wait time dropped to 15 seconds or 4 bars, whichever came first. At the bottom of the stairs, Mary listened. It was A Train, not a favorite, but at least you could dance to it. She climbed a few steps in her slippery black dancing shoes, scooting her hand up the railing, and tried to hear if it was crowded up there on this Sunday afternoon. There were some Baptists who didn't dance on Sundays, including her own sister, which tended to thin out the crowd considerably. Mary climbed a few more steps and thanked the Lord she was a Methodist like her mother. She had spent all day Saturday working the grill at the officers' club on the base, where there was seldom any dancing due, she'd been told, to the presence of a lot of old farts who preferred to drink their whiskey and smoke their cigars in peace and quiet. Officers who cared to dance could go and mingle with the enlisted men above the hardware store. One of Mary's 2 favorite partners was an officer, a young lieutenant from Atlanta, who was a pilot. Her second favorite dance partner was a fellow named Frank. Frank was the best friend of another fellow that Mary sometimes thought she might have feelings for. His name was George. He, like Frank, was from up north, somewhere in Iowa, they said, or maybe it was Idaho. George had dark eyes and even white teeth and a pretty nice singing voice. This Mary had discovered one day when he and his friends came over to the USO after consuming a bottle of brandy that came in someone's Christmas package from home. But he couldn't jitterbug, not to save his life, he said. And so we paid Frank to dance with her. It's good work when you can get it, Frank said, when she coaxed a confession out of him on the dance floor. Frank's job was to keep her away from the other guys, especially that flyboy from Atlanta. She had decided to be flattered instead of offended. Good call, Frank said, as he dipped her down thrillingly, almost to the floor. Georgie's crazy about you. Mary reached the top of the stairs. She took several deep breaths, hoping against hope that George and Frank had guard duty or something today, because she knew for a fact that the flyboy was waiting to dance with her on the other side of that door. Sure enough, it swung open, and somebody tall, dark, and handsome said, "Honey, come on in." It's probably Dwayne Loudspeaker, actually, who says, "Honey, come on in," because he's kind of involved with the music. Well, I'm going to stop there in the reading of sections. I think I will confess that my father's name is George, and that little story about paying a friend of his to dance with my mother is part of our family lore. But there's also Mary is probably in order for this book to be happening today instead of like about 5 years ago, or when I thought it was going to be coming out, and then a lot of other things happened and the world didn't work the way we thought it was going to work there for a while. Mary would have to be about, I figured if she was 16 or 17 in 1945, because this is, or 46, because this is, World War II vintage stuff. She'd have to be 94 or 95 in the present. And I thought I could see my mother doing it. I could see my mother at 94 or 95. She didn't quite make it that far, but she had an indelible personality. She had a immortal personality is what she had, and so she and the young man, the Foster Creswell character, whom I never really, I don't know what his real name was. You know, I was not in a situation at that time in my life to be interviewing the people who work in the kitchen in case I wanted to use them in a novel someday. So I never got his name, and I never saw him again. So, but he's in the book as far as I'm concerned. So are there any questions or, yes? Anne Circle, what is your question?
Those are such delightful characters, Mary Helen, and I'm wondering what sort of the nuts and bolts of how you choose who shall be a point of view character and who will be known to us through that point of view character. So somebody like Wayne Lotspeak, we feel we know him. By the end of the book, we feel we know him, and yet he's not a point of view character.
Yes, I mean, we get to know characters in novels, whether they're the point of view character or not, but clearly when you're really leaping into someone's life, that inspiring, bit from Zadie Smith, then you're inside of their experience. How did I choose? Well, Mary McIntyre and Foster were chosen for me, right? So then I needed another staff member, I thought. And I don't know, Dakota just kind of came to be. I think at the time I wanted, rather than having, there is a college age CNA whose name is Erica, who's also a very important character, and you do get to know Erica as well. So yeah, there are other characters that you get to know quite well. But I kind of wanted Dakota because I wanted to show that the way those two young men who, somebody thinking, well, they're, 20-something guys, how different can they be? They're totally different, and their prospects totally different, which is part of the reason why their personalities are different. Foster's got a lot of chips on his shoulder, as you find out as the story goes on. Dakota has none, and Dakota is just a very kind soul. He's just a wonderful guy, and he's also actually kind of based on certified nursing assistant at the place where my mother was for a while. Yes, Sue?
How much did you have to learn about gaming?
Oh, I had to learn a lot about gaming. Thanks for asking that question. I have a certificate in game design that I acquired specifically. Well, before you get too impressed, I had to take, I think I had to take 4 online courses to get my certificate from Kirkwood. And a very handsome certificate with a silver seal and everything. I have it framed on the wall next to my...
Well, did you take it, the course, in order to write the book?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I also, and before I took that course, I also took computer science at Creighton, in Omaha, Creighton University in Omaha, where I was teaching at the time, so that I could kind of know the lingo, and so that I had some idea about the relationship between code and what you see on the screen. Although, because the book took so long to come out, Foster really would have needed to learn less and less code because things are sort of prepackaged now. For game designers. Where you didn't at the start of it, when I first started writing it, I think you would have needed a room full of people to get the hair to wave in the wind on somebody's head. Well, it's not like that anymore. You kind of buy that package. And so yes, that's why I did it. Yes?
How is writing a mystery different from writing another type of novel?
Oh, that is a good question too. I thought it was going to be easier. It's not easier. My other 2 novels, one of them is a multi-generational family saga about my dad, George, his family from the Austro-Hungarian Empire on, and the other is actually kind of about my mother's family because she grew up in Georgia, not the one near the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but Georgia in the American South. And so that one too was, it went all over the place, and although in a different way. And I thought thought this would be easier, and it was not. It was very hard. And what was hard about it was plot, because that was something that, to me, was always kind of a framework, but not the point. And here, too, it is the framework and not the point. But if it's going to be a mystery, it has to be a little more of the point. It has to take up a little more of the space, in a sense. And so that also goes to the question that I thought you were going to ask, Anne, which was, how did I know which character to bring up next, right? If we're leaping into one character's. And the plot determined that. That was, so whatever needed to be revealed next, you had to have the point of view character be the guy or gal who could reveal it. But that was the hardest thing about writing this. I think maybe writing a mystery might have been a little bit easier for me if I had just had like a first-person narrator or one point of view character. But that wasn't what I was trying to do, so that was the hard part. Anybody else? Yes.
I just recently read the new book, The Candy House by Jennifer Egan, and it takes also that concept of downloading our personal information into computers and what are the ramifications in the future for you as well as the whole community. Do you feel that sense in the World of Pondside game, giving up individuals' personal information in for that game, or did that come from your classes that you took, or from readings that you've done?
Well, the Jennifer Egan use of the computers she's got a very different goal there. In that, for one thing, the residents think actually that the game is like a local network. We can have a local network, so that it's not going out because there's a server, there's a computer, a powerful computer that Robert has that is the server for the game, and so at first that seems to be the case. But they're not really downloading information. They're sort of Kitty is downloading her dream. Is not putting her dream and not her life, or her real information into it. And even Laverne, the kinds of things that they put in the portal are somewhat divorced from, the kind of private information like where have you lived and who are you married to and who did you know and even where did you work and so forth. That kind of stuff's not in there because you're creating this space that you want to hang out in. So I'm not thinking so much about that. But maybe there'll be a sequel. I don't know. A lot of I think of the people as having this opportunity with this game to create an ideal world and an ideal self, or that's not exactly right. More like to be who they really feel themselves to be. Kitty is in the wrong work, and Kitty feels more like who she really is when she's Catherine by Design, when she's the head of the Catherine by Design outfit in Manhattan. And we all get that feeling that there's from time to time that is this the place and the time and the person? Is this the life I'm supposed to be leading? What about the other lives? So I think that most of them, Laverne, for example, does use a lot of her husband is in her world, her portal, even though they're living in San Francisco, which they had never done, which was kind of an ideal place. And she apparently feels like it would be better to be a neuroscientist, putting the kibosh on Alzheimer's and other dementias, and getting a free trip to Sweden for it. So, any
Thanks
other?
a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming.
I have one burning question. So you did a wonderful introduction of this blue-eyed detective. Is that going to be a main character, or is that just a passing thought?
Well, he's not as important a character as the ones I just read to you,
Okay.
but he is in it. I mean, he is in it more than just that. Are there any blue-eyed detectives in the room? This isn't. But he's not. You see him. You'll see him some more. That's not the only place you see him. We do usually see him. Well, I guess our program is over, so I guess I can take this off. Thank you all very much.